Good morning, folks. Time for coffee this morning and to talk about our district and getting after this primary election. Hope to see some folks shining in real quick. They're starting to pop in. Sorry about being a minute late this morning. Had a typical infantryman technical problem. Had to reload everything. Good morning, Sandy. Hope everybody's got a good cup of coffee or whatever you like to drink in the morning. Good morning, Misty. It's going to be a great week, folks. We're driving into that last final sprint to get to the primary. Good morning, Greta. Good morning, Mom. Here we go again, huh? Let's see here. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get right into it this morning. And as always, I'll start with just a quick introduction. I am a American by birth, a soldier by profession, and Iowan by choice. I grew up in a military family. My parents are from New York. Dad served in the Army for about 23 years. His last assignment was in Maryland, where I met my wife. We've been married for 36 years, and we served a 32-year active duty tour with the United States Army, our last tour being in Iowa, which is what brought us to Iowa about 9 years ago now. During that tour with the Army, just focusing on the last 7 years as a colonel, I worked pretty significant level jobs, worked at the Pentagon, where I provided real-time or in-the-year briefings on training opportunities for all the 4 vice service chiefs to make decisions on. I also worked as a brigade commander in El Paso, Texas, with a training brigade responsible for training readiness of reserve soldiers deploying to combat, and we trained about 15,000 soldiers a year. And then I came up here to Iowa, where I was an operations officer and chief of staff for a 3-star headquarters over in the Quad Cities at Rock Island Arsenal. That headquarters responsible for all of continental United States training readiness for the United States Army Reserves and the National Guard. My wife and I, as I said, have been married for 36 years. We have three adult children, one in Georgia, one in Arizona, and one here with us now, helping with the campaign, but on her way back to San Antonio, Texas, where she's a teacher. Good morning, Sarah. Good to see everybody on. And go ahead and start generating questions, folks. I think what I'm going to do later this week is we'll do another Facebook Live, and my daughter will do sort of an interview style, so she'll ask me questions. We'll draw some of the questions from these events, and she'll just ask me those questions, and that'll give me the opportunity to dialogue based on questions you've already asked me for the first 30 minutes. So encourage your friends and folks to join in on that one, and I think they'll have an opportunity to learn a lot about me based on the questions that you have already asked me. Good morning, Kevin. So what I want to start with this morning is talking about why I'm running them, and I think this is important. And some of you have heard me tell the story of what the catalyst was and how we went about making the decision, we being my wife and I, making the decision to run. Good morning, Levi. And it truly was 4 friends sitting around a coffee table complaining about politics, none of us having ever thought about getting into politics. I've told you I'm a lifelong infantryman. And while I've studied our country and I've studied our Constitution and I've certainly sworn to protect it, getting into politics was not on the top of my list of things to do. But the idea came up, and one of them said, what we need to solve these problems we're complaining about is you to run, and that kind of put the seed in my head and I started thinking about, praying on it with my wife. Morning, Julie. That maybe that is what I was supposed to do. As a problem solver, as a fellow that's spent a lot of, my entire adult life solving small problems, complex problems, problems associated with just the leadership of men, mostly men. Again, I've said before, I was in the infantry. Most of my career was just with men in the infantry units until the latter half of my career as a senior officer. But also complex problems of national security or in combat, the complexities of dealing with a combat situation. And so I said to Robin that I think that's what I'm supposed to do, and she of course got right behind me and said, yeah, I agree, and so we started this run. And there's a lot of reasons to complain, and many of you have talked to me about specific topics, but if I can summarize it into one small thing that really gives me the passion to get after this problem our country is in, it's the constitutional federal republic. For the last 100 years, we have gone so far away from the constitutional federal republic. We created a situation where states and individuals have become dependent on the federal government. And we have created an environment of politicians that are not just lifelong politicians, but they're also, in order to get elected, they promise things to you. I'm going to go to Washington and do this. And sometimes we need to ask the question, why are we the people even asking that federal representative for an answer to a particular topic? If you think about our federal republic, the job of the federal government is not to solve our daily life problems. They should get out of the way of business. We shouldn't have an executive branch that's putting directives and fines and licensing requirements on folks in different areas. Arguably taxes that didn't run through the Congress. The Congress has the constitutional authority to taxes, not the executive branch. And so with that thought in mind, that's the way I approach every topic that somebody asks me about. My thought is, what does the Constitution say about responsibility? And so before I answer the question, if the Constitution doesn't give that responsibility, the authorities, if you will, to the federal government, then my first answer is that's a state issue or a local issue or an issue of personal responsibility in accordance with our Constitution. Let's agree on that. Then we can talk about the solution. But argue about it at the right level. If you want me to deliver it to you at the federal level, because it's a constitutional problem, great, then I owe you as much as I can in giving you a comprehensive answer and then thinking it through and delivering that solution to you. If not, I'll still discuss it with you and argue with you about it and with you come up with a solution, and then we should take that to our state representatives, our state senators, our governor, or again even closer to local. So that's why we need to get this done, and we've got about 10 days now to put the push on of calling friends and family and asking them to take a look at this candidacy and see if we can generate the interest and generate the number of votes that's going to be required to beat the party. And I can't tell you how important I believe that is. The party has for an entire year ignored you, the people of District 3, and has been telling you, the people of District 3, that they're going to deliver my opponent to the general, as if there wasn't even a primary. Wrongfully treating him as if he was an incumbent. He's not an incumbent. He's my challenger, just as I am his challenger. You're the decision maker, and you need to help me push that message out, and we'll get this thing across the goal line here on the 2nd. So the first question this morning is, I was in Earlham yesterday, over in Madison County, and we were talking about constitutional problem solving. So the question is, what do I mean by constitutional problem solving? And I kind of went around the edges on that a little bit as I talked about our constitutional federal republic. And it means just that. It means taking our Constitution, and let me see if I can find mine here. It's always around somewhere. You can see very well worn Constitution. Takes a paper clip to hold it together anymore, because I've got notes in this thing, and then I've got my Heritage Foundation Guide to the Constitution back here, which provides a lot of context and references to the Federalist Papers, which are right over here, the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist Papers, all points of reference to look at every problem from the not just the constitutional point of view, but the founders' point of view on this constitutional federal republic that they designed. And so, again, constitutional problem solving means using the Constitution as a guide. And that first question becomes probably the most important in terms of the future of the country. And that is, what does the Constitution say about responsibility? Does the Constitution, have we the people, through our Constitution, charged our federal government and or given our federal government the power to solve that problem, whatever the problem is? And if not, then we should ask ourselves, and I will ask this on your behalf in the Congress, why are we discussing that at the congressional level? That is not the responsibility of the federal government. Push that back to the states, let them make the decisions. Pick a topic. I mean, why do we have a federal government that is in any way, shape, or form involved in the welfare system of the country? It doesn't make any sense. I was telling my daughter the other day that about 30 years ago, that popped into my head when we had the Congress was debating steroids in baseball. We are not paying them to solve the industry of baseball's problems. Baseball can figure that out. So just a couple of examples, and that's what I mean by constitutional problem solving. So Keith asked me what was my job in the Pentagon and did I enjoy it. I absolutely enjoyed it. I was in what they call the J7. So the Army, the military places numbers on staff positions. So every general officer has a 1 is personnel and a 2 is intelligence, etc. And the J7, that's training. And that J stands for joint. So I was on the joint staff. Even those of you that aren't familiar with the military have heard of the joint staff, because you always see the chairman of the Joint Chiefs in different roles and providing advice to the president. And so the joint staff is designed to do the work that chairman of joint staff needs to make decisions for the entire Department of Defense. And so I was in what's called the Joint Training Working Group, and I was the chief of that group. It was about 10 folks, had some civilians on the team, and a couple of uniformed folks. And what we did was we received training information, training good ideas, whether it was a piece of equipment to buy or a training exercise or a simulated training kind of training tool, if you will. But what our purpose was, the way, got to go back to budgeting for a moment. So the way the Department of Defense at every level gets their budgeting is they analyze next year's requirements based on this year and that last year and the year before that's data, create a budget that gets forecasted into the White House and into the Congress, and eventually turns into a budget. Then the budget gets delivered back to the Department of Defense, and they're told, here's how much money you have for the next fiscal year. The government works on an October to September fiscal year, and so now you're in execution, and good ideas come up in execution. Somebody asked me about zero-based budgeting, I think they called it the other day. And so you're in execution, a good idea comes up. My job was to analyze that good idea, gather all the information available from all four services, get their opinions on it, put it in a condensed four-star level briefing, and make a recommendation to the four vice service chiefs, the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, about whether or not we should divert monies from another program or unfund another program that was in the forecasted budget in order to deliver this new good idea training budget. And it was relatively complex. I mean, if we agreed to do it, it didn't mean that all four services would contribute equally to the new problem, depending on who was using it, how much they were using it, and all that. But that's what I did. I did that for 2 years, and then I was selected for brigade command, and we headed down to El Paso to take command of the 5th Armor Brigade, a training organization. But thanks for that question, and I hope that provides enough clarity for folks about what that was. Yeah, listen, somebody's commenting on my opponent's post that the president commented on his run, and that's fine. I don't. That should not bother any of us. I still support the president. That's not an issue. I support the America First agenda. What's at issue here is what are we going to do about this, and what we are going to do about this is just continue to talk about this candidacy, about what you want and expect from your representative, and how we are going to message to the party that they don't get to control what you want, and how we're going to get to the primary and win the primary. And so, no adjustments to our plan. I've got an event Wednesday morning with some great Americans up in Polk County. I got an event Thursday with some great Americans over in Adams County. You know, I don't push Sundays on folks, but I'm certainly willing to come on Sunday to visit somebody. Again, as I say each week, private message me about the ideas you have to come see you, and encourage folks to exponentially increase our reach to the voters of this district. You probably still know friends that haven't or that are not going to vote by mail, and I think the cutoff for asking for absentee ballots is passed. So anybody that hadn't voted now is going to have to go in person, which is a good thing. So we've still got time to make those calls and encourage folks to get after the voting. Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm very confident that the party pushed the buttons on Senator Cotton and the president, and didn't deliver him, just like they're trying not to deliver to you an opportunity to choose. But again, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to get after the week. Morning, Danny. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's always just a comment on the time. It's always interesting trying to figure out when's the best time to do these Facebook Lives. So what I concluded was I should do them at different times to try to accommodate early morning risers and folks that work different shifts, and folks that are really busy during the week. So we get a Saturday one in there. You know, we've had larger audiences and smaller audiences, but each one I've noticed new names signing in. So, you know, it's worked out. And what we'll probably do this week is either go Tuesday or Wednesday evening, and that may be the last one before the primary. We'll see. All right. Morning, John. Yeah, we are another day closer to victory. That's right. That's the way we all got to look at it. Yeah, okay, so the question on red flag laws has come up again, so we'll talk about red flag laws. Let's, again, start with the Constitution. The Constitution is very clear. Your right to bear arms shall not be infringed. There's really not a lot of wiggle room there. So I don't understand how we elect politicians, we elect folks to go to Washington and represent us, even at the state level. And they think that they are now enlightened and all of a sudden they're smarter than you and should deliver on compromise. That's one of the reasons why our country is in so much trouble from a political standpoint, because we are always compromised. We compromise on every topic. And you know, we hear our politicians, like my opponent, talk about reaching across. I've got the skill set to reach across the aisle. Well, yeah, I can reach across the aisle too. I've done a lot of negotiation and compromising to cause people to pull together to get to the same objective. But from the constitutional point of view, we got to stop compromising to the left every time. So my view of reaching across the aisle is I reach across the aisle, get a good strong handshake in there, and pull the left back over to the right, and move the country back toward the federal republic we're supposed to have. The Second Amendment, there's a lot of thoughts on the Second Amendment. The first one is you hear all these thoughts about you know, well, why do you need a gun? Why do you need that kind of gun? You don't need that kind of gun for that kind of activity. You know, you don't need X to go target shooting. You don't need Y to go hunting. The answer to all those questions is none of your business. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have to have a reason for owning a gun. It just says your right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And that's the way our politicians ought to deal with it. So, you know, my opponent not only supports but co-sponsored a red flag law, and now he and some of his supporters, some of which in pretty high positions in terms of our state and the supposed defense of the Second Amendment, trying to defend that and say that, one, that it's not a red flag law, and that my opponent doesn't support red flag laws. Well, you know, okay, that seems a little bit dishonest to me. If you read, I think it's H.R. 6747, Alice or one of my friends that knows that number, make sure I didn't get it wrong. So you can look it up and read it. But the definition of a red flag law is that by its design, you have displayed, supposedly, a red flag. Somebody thinks that you are a danger to yourself or to others, and they present that red flag to the authorities, you know, conceivably social workers and police officers, and using just basically the threshold for a warrant, they get the authority to come and take your property from you. So how you can call that not a red flag law when that's exactly what that HR that he co-sponsored says is beyond my comprehension. The other part of it is he will defend it and say that, well, we wrote due process into that law. Well, you know, if you take something from me, you can't then deliver due process. So that's what a red flag law is. That's my thoughts on red flag laws. They're unconstitutional. They violate 5 of our first 10 amendments. To include, by the way, the 8th Amendment, which talks about undue fines. Because, again, if you think about it, once your property is taken from you, you're going to have to hire a lawyer or otherwise pay the fines associated with getting your property back at some point when they determine that you should have your property back. And oh, by the way, for the time that you are under this cloud of a suspicion, a accusation, or otherwise a red flag, you are not authorized to own a weapon or to purchase a weapon. Pretty much you're being treated as if you're a felon. That's wrong. Should not be acceptable. Should not be something that our politicians go to Washington and all of a sudden become smarter than us and more elite than us, and then are going to tell us how they're going to solve problems. And oh, by the way, I should also mention that those are feel-good laws. I mean, look at the title of it. It's Protecting Our Communities Act. Those are feel-good laws, and they don't even solve the problem they purport to solve. We got to stop accepting that from our elected politicians. Feel-good titles, feel-good words. One of the other conversations we had yesterday, I had the opportunity to talk about leadership again, and the science of leadership and the art of leadership. And the science of leadership is where you take the numbers, you take the metrics, you take the available data you have and plug that into your thought process. And then the art of leadership, where you take your experience and you take your knowledge of the people, the men and women that are around you. But one of the things you don't do in the end is make emotional decisions. Once you have a group of people that you're responsible for, emotions have a big role to play in how you deal with individuals. Your compassion for your fellow man is part of dealing with individuals. But when you're making a decision for large groups of people, a 40-man platoon or a 350 million man country, you can't take the emotions of a one or two or a small group and apply that to the decision process. If you do, it will almost always result in disenfranchising somebody. So that's my pitch on leadership and on the Second Amendment. Thanks for that question. Good morning, Rick and Whitney. Thank you both. Thank you, Scott. Do you believe it is dangerous that your opponent has nothing on his resume but being a politician? I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but I know for me I don't like it. It's interesting because I've commented on that, because I get asked. I get asked on the radio, I get asked on interviews, I get asked from y'all, what's the contrast between you and your opponent? And my opponent seems to take it as a, hi Howie. My opponent seems to take it as a negative statement, and my response to that is, if you see it as a negative statement, that's really your problem. You're the one that you chose that path. So to answer your question, from my perspective, I don't like career politics. I don't believe it's healthy for the country for folks to get into career politics. And then get elected and then stay in these elected positions for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but from a federally public point of view, it's unhealthy. I prefer not to go that route, and I know a lot of my supporters prefer not to go that route. I will say that it is clear to me that the party, again, trying to control the narrative, trying to control the outcome of this primary, it's interesting to me that for years the Republican Party has had term limits on as part of their platform, and now they're trying to take it off. They haven't taken it off yet, I don't believe, but those that run the party in Iowa don't like term limits. Some great Americans that are in that volunteer work for the party role, they pop up on Facebook every now and again and want to kick me on term limits. Well, he believes in term limits. He's taking away my right to vote. Well, think about that, friends, and talk to your neighbors about that if you agree with the logic that I'm about to give you on this idea that term limits takes away your right to vote for who you want. If the party refuses to deliver you a fair primary where you have the opportunity to know that there are two or more candidates out there so that you can review them and choose, even if Jack's getting his breakfast. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that, friends. Forgot about the 9 o'clock feed. Jack's happy. And the folks that work in the party, and if any of them are listening to me right now, and I'm sure some are, they're going to be going, oh, he's complaining, it's his fault, it's his job to get his name out. Well, I agree, and I've been doing that, and it is my responsibility, but it's also their responsibility. And when the party, all the way up to Washington D.C., dumps money on one candidate, allowing him the opportunity to do mailers and buy mailing lists and ads, and they don't provide those resources to the other, they're not delivering you a fair primary. So you're not getting to choose, and you're not getting, as a people, as an entire district, you're not getting the opportunity to vote out the fellow that's already been a member of the club. The other thing is they say, well, you know, you have this really good person in office. You're taking away my right to keep him in office. Well, you know, that's probably the most fair statement that I've heard on it from a particularly fine gentleman a little bit south of me that talks about that. But my only response to that is there's 3.5 million people in Iowa. There's got to be another fine gentleman that we can put in behind. And what's the difference if we replace somebody after 40 years or 20 years? You know, I mean, it would be a legitimate complaint if we were talking about term limits being 2 years. But we're talking about a range of, we've changed the term to service limits, as most of you know now. We're talking about a range of 12 to 18 years, depending on how they transition from the House to the Senate. And you're going to tell me that we can't find somebody else in 12 to 18 years, and that's not enough? We got to wait 40 or 50 years? It doesn't make any sense. Eventually, we have to replace them. And, you know, so the answer to that is we set up a system where once a fellow serves his term and we choose his replacement, as soon as that primary makes the choice, then the fellow in the seat provides training, provides transitional information, all the way through the general election and then through the swearing-in ceremony for the next Congress, and then even after that. You know, in my case, I've done this. You know, I don't know how many jobs I had in the Army over the course of 30 years, but every job had a train-up period, and then I could always reach back or forward to the fellow that I replaced, or they could reach to me and get information, ask questions about what was going on. So, you know, we've got to believe that we have other folks that can do it, and that we can set up a system where we don't lose information that's available. So, yeah, I agree, Kevin. There was a Second Amendment. I think I covered that one. What is your opinion on FISA and how it has been used? Do you think it is necessary to national security, or is there an argument? Wow, John, I think the answer is yes. I know there's multiple questions in there, and we're going to try to get after it. You know, if you go back to the origins of FISA, there was a lot of logic associated with the national security reasons to develop FISA. But we are certainly getting enough. There was always a danger, right? There was always a risk. There was always a risk of unconstitutionally unmasking or unconstitutionally tracking American citizens. And with the open source news that we have right now, it appears clear that there's been a lot of abuses. And so, yeah, I think right now there's definitely an argument to get rid of it, and I think my preference would be to get rid of it and then make those elected officials go back to the drawing board to try to figure out how better to service the foreign intelligence requirements that we have for the country. Listen, we absolutely have foreign intelligence gathering information, analytical requirements, and there's probably no way to say that an American citizen isn't going to be involved in those conversations, because we have business transactions, we have a lot of stuff going on. So, you know, I think it's time to go back to the drawing board, get rid of what we have, and figure out how to make sure those protections are in there. Yeah, H.R. 6747. That's the bill that our former representative wrote. Jack is pretty awesome, thanks. H.R. 6747, I believe the title was Protect Our Communities and Rights Act. Again, soft language. I love that term. My friend and campaign manager Steve and I were talking about this last year, and you know, it really became so clear to us the way progressive politicians, and by the way, I've said this, you'll hear me repeat it, but progressive politicians as opposed to Democrats, because it's not just the Democrats. At this point in our history, their extreme views are pretty dangerous for the country. But the progressive Republicans, the progressive politicians that claim to be in the middle, and are continue to compromise on these non-compromisable topics are just as bad. And they all use soft language. They come up with some idea that they want to push, like a red flag law, and they title it "Protect Our Communities and Rights." And if you read the bill, you can it will be clear to you they're not protecting your communities, and they're certainly not protecting your rights by writing that thing and by supporting such an action that would, again, take property from you under the guise of protection. So HR 6747, please take a look at it and don't allow his supporters to tell you that it's not a red flag law, that he doesn't support them. He has to answer to that. Social Security is a huge topic to cover, but do you think it will be there in the future? If so, what needs to be done now so it's in good shape for the future? Thanks. And that's a great question, because Social Security falls under government entitlements, and anybody like me that wants to talk about the balanced budget is going to talk about entitlements and the reforms to the entitlement programs that needs to happen. But please understand this: you've been paying into Social Security your entire life. The term would be fully vested. Then we, the country, now we owe that return to you. I absolutely think Social Security needs to be adjusted. My preference would be a grandfathered plan that made sure that anybody who was fully vested in Social Security received their Social Security benefits in accordance with the current rules, and then start adjusting the rules based on age and where you are along in your career, all the way back to 20 years old. Let's say that most folks are entering the workforce at about 20. That they could opt not to pay into Social Security, or maybe even we go back to 25, and at 20 there's no choice. It's just Social Security is done. Remember, folks, when Social Security was created, it was not a retirement plan. It was supposed to be a retirement safety net, just a little bit of a safety net, just in case something went wrong for you. The failure there, again, is why do we have the federal government involved in the individual finances of Americans? That was a bad idea. I wouldn't have supported it at the time. But here we are 100 years later. Now we have it. Folks like my friend that asked the question, certainly fully vested into the system and deserve to be able to extract that money in their retirement years. But as a country, we should change the culture, mindset on, again, repeating my constitutional federal republic mantra, and not as individuals look to the federal government for our retirement years, for a solution to anything to do with our retirement years. So let's get them out of it. So that's I think that gives you enough of a frame to tell you where I sit on it. We absolutely have to have reforms. There's probably other good ideas on how we can reform it and make sure it stays solvent. But in the long run, I believe that's the answer. Deliver the fully vested folks their monies, and get the federal government out of it. It would probably take 40 years to do that, because you've got to go grandfather all the way back and make sure everybody gets treated fairly in accordance with what they've put into that system. Yeah, I agree. That was the whole thing. Yeah, that's so a couple of supporting comments to the idea of phasing it out, and that's the answer is to get it done. You have to phase it out so people are treated fairly. And listen, you talk about what I said earlier about leadership and getting emotion out of leadership. It would take us, we the people, to take that away from the federal government, tell them to get their hands off of it, and then we as a culture telling folks the federal government is not the solution to your retirement years. That's your responsibility, and if you have an issue, then you turn to family, and there's an idea. Let's go to a position where we're supporting the core family again, not not government solutions to where family ought to be providing for each other. So you turn to your family, you turn to your church as a means of that was Jack. As a means of solving a problem if you come up with one, and in the meantime, let's just encourage people to be self-reliant and not turn to the government for solutions. So I've got a question on contract tracing. Have I discussed contract tracing? And no, I haven't. Again, the short answer is no. I'm against this idea. It's being presented as a scientific-based way to track folks so that you know where potential outbreaks are going to come, and it sounds logical. But in the end, we have politicians, again, talking about controlling our daily lives, talking about restaurateurs having to take names and addresses down of anybody that comes to eat at their restaurant, or other means of tracking you, so that they can determine where they think the next outbreak is gonna happen. And I just think that's a bad idea. And I think that if we allow it to happen, if we allow that power to go to the government to track our every move, we all know they're tracking the phones to some degree, but mostly that's for ad purposes. I think it's going to hurt the economy, because I don't know about you, but if I go into a restaurant and they want to write down my name and address and which booth I sat in, I'm probably going to go back home and crank up my barbecue. So not big on this idea of tracing based on a disease. Yeah, no, Alice, you're exactly right. That was back to the Social Security discussion. We never had the choice. It just comes out of our paycheck. We were trained. We as a people were trained over the course of those 100 years, not even to consider our gross pay. We pretty much just look at our net pay, and in the end, if you look at your gross pay, you realize just how much the government is actually taking from you, not just your income tax. Would you work for a balanced budget amendment, and how would you work to get the debt under control? Absolutely. I think balanced budget is required. I do not support this idea of fiat currency that one of our teammates brought up a couple weeks ago. What I thought about that. That's the term used to basically just print money and not be concerned about the debt of the nation. And no, I don't think that is. I don't think that's tenable. So absolutely balanced budget, and the answer to the debt is you can't get after the debt until you have a balanced budget. So just throw that over to the side, throw that crazy debt over to the side, and we talk about the deficit. So the way we get the budget balanced, is assuming we actually have constitutional conservatives in the House, and I'm wondering right now how many we actually have. And then we, the people, elect more folks like you to get to the Congress, and then you get a coalition of folks wrapped around the balanced budget idea. You pull out the Constitution, and you determine the requirements of the federal government, and you forecast the revenues based on previous years of taxes and fines and licensing and the totality of the federal budget. Then you lay out the federal government requirements based on the Constitution. You fully fund the requirements of the Constitution, like the Department of Defense, the Department of State. You partially fund some lower priority programs, and then at some point you run out of two things. You run out of federal responsibilities, and you work to cut those programs. You run out of tax revenues, and you cut programs. back to the earlier comment where you have zero based budgeting, zero balance budgeting. If you have a good idea in the current year, then as I described my work in the Pentagon, if our elected representatives agree on a new program, they would be required to cut something somewhere, cut the budget or cut a program in order to fund this new program. So that's also required. So the balanced budget comes by constitutional budgeting, by adding a zero balance budgeting process in there where you can't just add a program, you have to fund the program. I said last week, our politicians talk about paying for tax cuts. We got to pay for our own money. That doesn't make any sense. What they need to tell you what they're going to do is how they're going to pay for programs. And again, you go to paying for programs by making the cuts where you have to make it so that you're only spending the money you have. The budget has to include the Department of Defense. It has to include the Department of State. There's a couple other agencies in the federal level that have to be funded. Then it has to include contingency funds, whether it's the potential to have a war somewhere or the potential for a disaster, and you place some money against that, and then you place some money against the debt, and that's where you can apply the opportunity to bring the debt down. So yes, balanced budget I think is important to the country, and we will work on getting that done. Yeah, I wouldn't. Another Social Security comment, and yeah, I wouldn't want to depend on just Social Security for retirement, but some folks do, and that's a cultural change that we need to have. The government has worked hard over the years to replace the family. We as a nation need to get back to the family being the core strength of the people. Thoughts on getting us back there? No, I absolutely agree, and we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier, and as your federally elected representative, that's one of the things that I want to do. And thoughts on getting there is getting the federal government out of things. Get them out of your retirement. Get them out of your health care. Get the federal government out of topics of daily needs. Frankly, even out of a terrible thing like the evil of murder. Why do we even have the federal government talking about the solutions to a shooting? Forget the stupidity of gun control being an answer to a shooting. Why do we all automatically jump to what's the federal government going to do to it? Frankly, why do we look for the federal government solution to a hurricane or a wildfire? It doesn't make any sense to me. But back to your point of getting back to the family, get the federal government out of Social Security or out of your retirement more appropriately. Get them out of your health care, and cause individuals not to need the federal government for anything. That's the starting point for turning our focus back to our families. Get the need for the federal government out of the individual's life. Yeah. There was a lot of so there was a comment about a House Resolution 6666, soft language to fund mobile units to go to public homes. Blah blah. It's all about the tracing, and I have heard about that. You talk about a dangerous idea. I can't imagine the situation we're going to be in as a country if we have states that are sending law enforcement or law enforcement to your home to determine if you've had a virus and potentially separate your family. I mean, that's dangerous. You talk about dangerous. That's a very dangerous idea. So yeah, I have read a bit about it. I guess my comment on it would be, a lot of times we hear these things and our automatic reaction is that's crazy, it'll never happen. And I will take that comment and provide this kind of warning to all of you. If you go back to where Social Security began and where, federal safety nets and federal level solutions to all these things, probably a lot of folks back then thought it would never happen. And the way these things happen is the crazy idea gets thrown out there, and then over time we just inch our way toward it. I think that's an example of what I'm talking about, where our progressive politicians that we elect with the confidence that they're conservative-minded, family-oriented, self-reliant oriented kind of folks, and then they go to Washington and they become part of the elitism that thinks that they're smarter than us and that they should tell us how to run our daily lives, and or they get worried about their next election and they need the party backing to get elected again. And now all of a sudden you have reaching across the aisle, meaning compromise to the left, and compromise to the left is killing our country, and we need to stop it by sending folks in there that won't compromise on their integrity, won't compromise on our Constitution, won't compromise to the left on every topic, and won't be concerned about whether or not they got to do something for the next election. If you make the right decisions based on what you told people you were going to Washington for, you should be confident in your reelection with or without party support. And that's what I'll do for you. Thoughts on pro-life heartbeat laws, Planned Parenthood? Yeah, I hope, by the way, that you folks, as you encourage people to listen to us and take a look at us, get them to the website and get them to the videos, and so you can see that I've been talking about these things consistently, and I will continue to talk about them consistently. I am absolutely pro-life. I have equal concern for both the health, the mental and physical health of the mother and the child. The preborn infant deserves protection. The mother deserves to be taken care of, especially if she's been through a trauma or some otherwise unpleasant experience that caused her to become pregnant. It doesn't matter what the means of conception is. Life is a gift from God, and we should protect it. Again, both the mother and the preborn child. Planned Parenthood, again, talking about soft language, there's nothing Planned Parenthood about it. It's a business. It's a business that was started, by the way, for the idea of population control. So I absolutely don't believe that Planned Parenthood should be funded by taxpayer dollars. I wish it truly didn't exist, or it existed for what it really claims to be, a place for somebody to go to plan their parenthood. But abortion is evil, and we as a culture should not accept the extinguishing of a life for convenience, no matter what the excuse is, whether it's economics or the capacity to care for the child. We as a culture should care for that child upon birth, and we should care for that mother as well, with helping her get through whatever the potential issues are that she has. So defunding Planned Parenthood is on my agenda. As you all know, it becomes difficult when people start with building budgets and they start adding things on. So hopefully we can get to a point where, back to the balanced budget amendment, we can also talk about single item budgeting, so that Planned Parenthood would have to come up for a vote on its own, and hopefully in that case it would never see the light of day. But that's another piece of the budgeting that we need to work on. Thank you, Lou. Hey folks, I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you that I've had just a huge honor this week. I went to Desert Storm as a company commander in 1990, and within the last couple of days, because of you folks, my new friends here in Iowa, spending so much time talking about what I'm trying to do. I've had, I don't know, about 10 of my soldiers from that company have come up on the net here on Facebook, and what a wonderful, just a wonderful week to have these great Americans that all went to Saudi Arabia and then Iraq and then back into Kuwait with me. We had quite a trip, Lou, and Lou Shaver on there. He was actually on my vehicle with me, my gunner, as we did the thing. So thanks for being on. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your service as well. One of the biggest encroachments of the government in people's lives is that of taxes. How would you go about forcing a justification of each tax and eliminating a majority of it reducing? So that's wow, Levi, I really appreciate that question. This will be a very unpopular thing that I'll be working on when I get to Washington, but one of the answers to that, I believe, is talking about in my view, my analysis, my constitutional analysis is that it is unconstitutional for the executive branch to lay taxes on you. And in my view, every license, every fine, everything that the executive branch can do to you through the EPA or the FDA, or you pick the agency, is a tax. And the Constitution does not give the executive branch the authority to tax you. So the first answer, I believe, is make all those things see the light of day in Congress. Make your congressman and your senator vote on those topics so that they can't just sit over there and keep their hands clean because the executive branch is placing them on you. I think that's the first step. You brought something I hadn't thought about, but the idea of justifying each tax and eliminating the majority. But I think I never thought of that particular question, but I think the part that I had thought about, making the executive branch justify their licensing and their fines, would be a start. I think another way, although we're probably way too far down the electronic age to do it, is causing American people to actually see the totality of their taxes, from whether it's the gas tax or taxes you pay when you purchase a home, or again, the licensing requirements, all that. The idea of a successful tax year being getting money back from the federal government, as opposed to looking at the entire tax burden that you paid and realize that you're paying much more than 10% in taxes, is part of that conversation. So I like that idea of justifying each tax. I think the starting point is the executive branch. But I think I guess the word transparency would fit in this conversation, and I think our elected representatives owe us it, at the state and the federal level, by the way. Yep, single item budgeting. I think that's part of the budget conversation. Okay, thanks, Kevin. Kevin just he's throwing out one of my closing parts when we get to closing. We're in the final stretch before the primary, and all of us need to share posts and do what we can to get Bill in front of folks. And I appreciate that thought. And I ask you all what I've been asking for weeks. I got asked this question yesterday, and the power of the people is the ability to exponentially increase communications. We are able to get some ads out this week. It'll be the first ads we did. They'll be going out in some of the papers in the counties. But it's not going to be enough. The only way that we're going to beat the party is for the exponential capability of the folks on this forum and every other forum to call their friends. And remember, I'm more than willing to come every day to some location and talk to small groups of folks and ask them to do the same thing. So thanks for that comment, Kevin. I appreciate it. When the opinion of the Supreme Court finds against a law, why does everyone think it negates the law? Isn't it a law until the legislature rescinds it? No, I got to study on that. I think that the law then has to go back into the process to be determined whether or not it's going to be rewritten or rescinded. But I guess actually your answer is correct. It is still on the books until it's rescinded. But I think it's required that that happens. So, good morning, Whitney. You're in there now. Do you see a role for the feds in Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc. in the light of viewpoint suppression? No, I don't. I'm still in the camp that censorship is not a good plan. Whenever you enter censorship, it's just like when the government enters in the business of not stimulus, supporting particular industries with monies. Yeah. Well, even if you look at the COVID issue right now, where the governors try to use good language like essential businesses. Now you have the government in the business of deciding what is or isn't essential. It's the same thing will happen in censorship, even if it's our government agencies. And the problem with that then is it becomes law, it becomes binding, it becomes something we can't do anything about. And who are you going to trust to determine, from a government standpoint, writing the law, determining what the right censorship of Facebook or Google is? The answer to it, I believe, has to be the free market. This is a hard one because so much of the electronic world is controlled by a small group of folks. But the answer is, we have to find other outlets. We have to encourage other businesses to open up in the web that allows us to have an uncensored voice through the market pressures that we can put on them. A government solution will not work for the reasons I said. If the government that writes that law is controlled by Nancy Pelosi, we're in a lot of trouble. And I'm not sure it would be much better if it was controlled by, McCarthy, for example. So, no, I do not see a role other than the potential break up or prevention of the monopolistic type of situation we can be in with the web, and making sure there's opportunities for others to have web-based venues for us to express our opinions on it. Recently, the president mandated churches can open nationwide. Do you support this move by the president, or should it be in the hands of the governors? Neither. I think the president was wrong. I think his sentiment is right. I'm glad that he has the courage to get on the national stage and tell people that their right to worship is being infringed. But I don't think he has the authority. He does not have the constitutional authority to override the governors and tell them that they're going to open up their churches. But I also don't think the governors ever had, should have, or have now the authority to close churches. And I think it's terribly oppressive and wrong that folks are being fined or threatened to be arrested for worshiping. Again, read the Constitution. It's very clear. Those humorous memes that are on that, say, so you mean this matters unless we have a virus. There's a little humor in that, but it's true. There's nothing in here about suspend your right to worship because you might get ill. The government's role is to provide information to us. That's what I believe. The government's role, because they have access to research, they have access to information. They have a role in providing us information and saying, Be careful. Frankly, so just to show you where I'm coming from, I don't think the government should have ever had the authority, or we should never relinquish the authority to tell us that we can't smoke in a restaurant, or we have to wear a seatbelt. It's not their role. What their role is to say, here's the science-based data that tells you that smoking is bad for you, and then leave it to us to decide whether or not we're going to purchase cigarettes or cigars or whatever. Same thing with not just the churches, but every business out there. Here's our concern with this virus. Here's the fact-based data. And of course, I think all of us on here wonder how much facts we're getting and how much of the facts are being distorted. Anyway, long way around getting to you telling you neither have the authority to tell us that we can't go to church, and I'm very bothered that we've been put in that position. And I encourage everybody to continue to pray and encourage their pastors to open up the worship services. And if the congregation is concerned, let's figure out the masking and the sanitation stuff for your hands, and figure out how to care for each other. But we can do that. We, the people, can do that. Our governor talks about trusting the Iowans to do the right thing, and yet she restricted so much of our economy that she might as well shut the government down. It's wrong. We should have never allowed the government to take those kind of authorities from us, and we should be very concerned about where the future is going with now politicians believing they have those authorities because we allowed it to happen. So there's my long-winded answer. To get back to your actual question, yes, I think the president was right to make the comment that worship is essential to our souls, but no, he didn't have the authorities to override the governors, and no, the governors don't have the authority to close our churches. I don't think. So I agree, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That's what I was looking for. So back on the Supreme Court issuing an unconstitutional thing, it is still on the books, but not supposed to be enforced until the legislature goes back and addresses it. That's the right answer. Thanks for helping me. Yeah, exactly, Levi. Yeah, I've read a lot of your stuff, Sandy, so it's all good. Let's see, I got one from the Facebook Live. What can be done to bring back fact-based media coverage to restore integrity to journalism? Wow. I guess the answer comes back to us. It's we the people. The only way we can get the product we want, whether it's education, a steak at a restaurant, or fact-based media, is to demand the product. And the way you do that is to not buy this product and go buy that product. In this particular case, be very choosy about where you get your media, and encourage your friends to do the same thing. I think that's the only answer. And it is a problem because a lot of folks, they work very hard. Some are lazy, of course. Others that just work very hard. They only get a small opportunity to consume news, and they reach to the available news. So it is a scary topic. But the answer has to be we the people. A government solution will not work, even in the topic of fact-based news. It's a product, and we have to demand that the product is delivered appropriately. Yeah, I agree, Sandy. I think One America News is doing a pretty good job. Our own local, the Iowa Standard fella that's working hard to provide fact-based conservative news outlet. I encourage you to take a look at him. I just for your information, the way I do it is, I don't watch any of the programs. I go sorting through the available news outlets, and I pick the articles that I want to listen to, so that I can kind of control the, how much of their rambling I need to subject myself to, just so that I have an idea of what they're talking about. Yes, it does, Julie. Thanks. No pun intended. Yeah, I think the Iowa standard is excellent, and Jacob Hall is a good man, and he's trying very hard to provide uh, Southwest Iowa in particular a viable news outlet that provides, I think, fact-based but very good writing, very fair articles on a pretty wide range of topics. All right, friends. Well, we've shared about an hour and 10 minutes of our Saturday morning. I'll start looking to close this down, and as always, I'll start some of my closing comments, and if another question pops in, I'll field that. But I thank each and every one of you for your time. It's not lost on me how much you're investing in this idea we have to deliver constitutional problem solving to our district. And I would take this opportunity as well to tell you this has been it's been an interesting and frustrating year in some ways, but an extraordinarily rewarding year with a number of people that I've met, each and every one of you on here this morning. But I've walked the streets of many of our little towns. I've met technicians and city workers out there, fixing flooding issues while they were stopping to talk to me for a little while as they were working on the streets, and HVAC technicians and business owners and farmers. A couple of farmers have had me out to their place to do some good farm work, which is extraordinarily enjoyable, while they're educating me on things that I'm not all that familiar with. And it's just been a powerful year in terms of meeting great Americans in this place that I've chosen to retire. So thank all of you for that. I encourage you to continue to talk about the candidacy and our intent to defeat the Republican Party on the 2nd of June. And I hope to hear from some of you during the week. And I'm not sure what we'll do on the 2nd. We're debating on what to do on the 2nd and where to kind of do something under the my respect for all of you to pay attention to the restrictions the way you see fit. But we'll figure something out, and then on the 3rd we'll start getting after the general. Thanks for your time this morning. Look for a Facebook post, Facebook post for the next one, Tuesday or Wednesday evening. Thank you, John. Let me know, and I'll be out your way. Head that way in a heartbeat. So again, invitations to come see. I'm open for them all week. Talk about it. Encourage folks to get out there and study the candidates, pick their candidate. I will see you all on the net or on the internet during the week, and some folks up on Wednesday morning I'll be in Polk, and Thursday I'll be in Adams, and we'll look for more opportunities. I'm very proud to be part of all of you. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless our country. And Jack says, grr. Goodbye, friends.